All right, so in this video, we're going to see how we can model a knife. Now, it's a little bit of a simpler knife, but the concepts from this, the ideas and approach can be applied to more complicated knives, even other things like swords. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so here is the end result or what we're hoping to accomplish. So let's go ahead and switch to a different file now and get started. And you'll see I have nothing here because we are starting from scratch. So I'm going to create a plane and adjust its orientation by switching it to positive Z to get it going vertical like this. I also have a reference image of uh, the knife I want to use here. And I'm going to load that into a regular Cinema 4D material. And that can be found for me right here. I'm also going to uncheck reflectance. And I also want to keep an eye on this resolution because the width and the height there are what I'm going to input into my plane to make sure it has the same aspect ratio as this image and the image isn't getting squashed or stretched. I'll then apply this to the plane. Looks like I may need to rotate it eventually. What else do we want to do in here? We want to come in here to the viewport section, set the texture preview size to no scaling. We've already turned off reflectance, and I probably will want to go in here, turn on alpha, and just load in a color for right now. So that way, if I do want to make this transparent, I can do that. So now we need to rotate this. So I can just flip it 180, and I think I actually did that as well. So that should work. And then I can just right click, go to rigging tags and choose protection tags so that we don't accidentally select it or actually just move it. I'm going to close actually I won't close my material manager, but I will make it smaller. No need to have it quite that large with just that one material. Now there's really two main parts to this. Okay, so there's the blade and then kind of the rest of it. I don't know, the handle, and if this was a sword, I would call it a hilt, but I don't think that applies here. So let's go ahead and get started with that. And to start, I really am going to use the pen tool here. Now, by using the pen tool, I'm going to make something that maybe isn't quite as clean polygon-wise as it could be, but I'll also go over how we could kind of maybe clean that up a bit. So I'm starting with my pen tool here. Now, I'm not really going to be able to see this as I'm drawing it out because the plane will be in the way. Although I guess I can turn the alpha back on, but I noticed it was looking a bit weird in the recording. Let's see if turning on transparency there helps. There we go. So that should make it a little bit easier to see my pen tool. And as I've talked about in some other videos, I just kind of draw this out pretty simple. I don't worry about drawing out handles as I'm coming along here, which you'll see. So maybe something like that. So, oh no. So let's try that one more time. This time with, polygon pen. Not what I wanted at all. And that explains a whole lot. Well, that's not going to work. So let's do this again, but this time with the regular pen tool, the spline pen tool. Actually, you should do a video on the polygon pen tool, though I think there are already some good ones. So pretty much the same process. You'll notice this looks the exact same. Okay, there's my spline. A couple of things I'm going to just kind of clean up just for myself. I'm going to scale these so that they're straight, even though they may not be. I feel like they should be, and it could just be something in the image. Definitely want to make sure these are straight, so I'll scale them on the Z. I'm sorry, that's the X. And then these as well. Okay, now this, like I said, may not match my image, but I think it would be, I take this one back. This one we're just gonna roll with there. All right, now for some of these, I do need to give them a soft interpolation. I'm gonna start with, say, this one. All right, right click off into nothing, I see. You can see that looks pretty good. I can adjust my handle, so that works. Same with this one. And I'm just skipping around because I know these are the easier ones, whereas these others are gonna require me to break handles. Actually, I wonder if I can get away with leaving that one. So this one, I'll do soft interpolation. And maybe something like that. Honestly, I think we can just say that's good. I'm going to take this spline and put it into an extrude here. Okay, now, like I said, you could do this polygon with just polygon objects, and it would probably give you a little bit cleaner result. But we'll just start with, say, something like this. I can always symmetry this too. So I'm going to keep that in mind as I'm making this, that I don't have to necessarily worry about doing things on both sides. I did turn the X-ray mode on in the extrude so I can see through this again. And with the spline, I'm going to set the intermediate points type to natural. And what that's going to do is give us some more edges around this. If this was set to the adaptive, notice how I don't have any up here. I don't have any down there where things are flat. And I'm going to need that when it comes to kind of cutting this up to get the other blade elements in. So this isn't perfect. Like, I really don't need that many there. And honestly, I probably could delete some of those before I get too into this, but I'll just leave that as is. And really at this point, I'm going to make this editable. I don't need all these selection tags, so I will get rid of those. Call this the blade. And now what I'm trying to do is to cut in some of these different elements, with the exception of this kind of capsule shaped one, which we will do at the end with the knife. Really what I want to do, oh, that's strange. I don't remember that being that off, but oh well, is kind of have edges where these lines are, because that's really where the knife is starting to come to a point, or the blade, the edge is going to be. So I'm going to need all of these to be able to be scaled down. So I'm going to need shapes going across here. And the way I'm going to do that is by just using plane cut. And this is where things can get a little bit kind of not as clean as they could be, because I'm just adding completely new points in some places when I really could just use existing ones. Like, for instance, there's no reason I shouldn't use that one, but I'll just cut that bottom. At least I'm lining it up with that one. I did turn snap on to at least snap to certain points. So let's see. That one should work for there. I'm going to need one right here. See, and that's pretty close, so I could almost use it, but I'll just add a new one. And all right, so at least that direction, this is working. Now, what I did have to do here, I'll just reset this to the default, is switch the mode here to world and then adjust the plane. So I believe I was in XZ. No, I was in YZ. Okay, but I will need to go now into XZ for, say, this one. I'll just cut like straight across there. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to have to do something to get those parts in. And actually, I wasn't done with the YZ. So I'll just cut in some points. That will hopefully make sense here in a second. And honestly, I should be using some of my existing points. That way they're not completely off. Something like that. Going to need some here as well. And all of this will hopefully make sense here very soon. As we'll see, I'm just kind of getting these points in so that I can cut across here and have enough points to define those edges. So I already have this all defined. For this, I can really just start pulling points up to get this. So I have something like that. And oh no, the problem with that now is that this kind of goes across, so I probably shouldn't have done quite that many. So we'll do something like that. So this can be right here. That looks good. Maybe not quite as straight or curved as I would like. So I'll go back to plane. Just add a couple right there. Say something like this. And then come through and do a line cut. Say something like that. And now I will go back in and do my plane cut across here to give me some of those extra points if I want to kind of curve and get this to match a little bit closer. All right, so I'm ignoring kind of that. I really don't need those. If I want to get rid of them, I should just be able to. Make sure I turn on tolerant selection, select them, and then choose dissolve, assuming I can find it. There we go. Similar type of approach to get that part in here. And while this may seem a little bit strange right now, it's going to come together really quickly once I have these different parts into this. And because I have some of these segments in here, See, I'm just able to kind of click and get something close to this as I'm going. If I do want to add more, I absolutely can come back to, say, plane cut and just cut in a couple more so that we can round this out as much or little as we would like. And really, how much detail I need in here is going to be based on how close we're going to get to this thing. If this is like a prop for a game, we're probably going overboard here. But if it isn't, then, I'd say we're doing pretty good. Now, this is the point where I would go through and clean things up. So for instance, I could take this point and these points, and I have to be a bit careful here because there's multiple, but select these points and then go through and weld them. So let me find weld, 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 weld. There we go. Weld them together. Select these, weld them together, and just kind of go through and see where I have points that I really aren't doing anything, where my knife or blade isn't curving, and I could just as easily weld them or actually even get rid of them. So something like this, come through and then dissolve. And you can see I can clean up that way, because really the only edges I would really want to have here are ones that go all the way down. And that's where kind of doing this with polygons would have been a better idea, because I would have ended up, let's turn off the X-ray mode for this, without kind of these places here where the polygons, the edges create n-gons instead of the 4-sided polygons that I have. So that's kind of the one downside of this method, but really it shouldn't make too much of a difference for most purposes, unless of course we're doing, like I said, a prop for a game or something that, polygon count matters, optimization matters. I'm not terribly concerned about that for this. So we have those lines in here, and you may be going, all right, well, how do we get to the blade, that look? And now all I'm going to do is come back here to my front view, turn back on my X-ray, and select all these points now that I need to scale. And so I'm going to assume that these really should be cleaned up, but starting with this point, all of these for this section of the blade, like those being too close together is kind of a problem. Could be, we will see. And then this top part as well. So starting here, selecting all these. Right, just do that. And from there, I can just come in. I'll turn off X-ray so we can see this, maybe even the plane as well. All we're going to do is scale these in. All right, actually, that works. We just want to snap them, but I will turn off snap because I don't want it, and they're not completely together, which probably isn't a bad thing, but we can go and just do that. So something like that. Now we have our point, but you may be going, well, it doesn't really look like it has that kind of blade, that edge, and that is due to our Fong angle. And with a bit of luck, all we'll have to do is just kind of turn this down until we get that blade to look good. And it works for the most part. Okay, we have an issue right there. And then this, which actually looks like something I just forgot to select. So that is not too difficult to fix. All right, and for the most part, there we go. There is our blade. We're not seeing the break right here. We can come back and fix that after I fix kind of what's happening right here, at least try to. And I think it's because, yeah, we have just, crazy n-gon here. So I will use my line cut to come in and just cut, say, something like that. But it didn't like that. So let's see. Maybe we do this one. Interesting. All right, well, let's try just getting something in there. There we go. Maybe that will help. The other problem could be that we haven't welded these points together. We just scaled them very small. And so something I'll want to do as well is select all of my points, come up here, right click and choose our optimize, and I'll just go into my settings to make sure that points is turned on unused point, and it's going to weld anything that is closer than 0.001 centimeters together. And you'll notice here that my point should go down quite a bit. And they did, from 294 to 226. So that's good. And then I can try my line cut one more time. See if that works now. And it does. It actually makes things worse. So maybe we'll go back and try that one like I wanted to. That one still doesn't work. Well, we'll pretend like that's working. Man, this is pretty broken. What I could try to do is actually maybe get rid of some of these points. So I'll select all of these and weld maybe towards the middle. Do the same with these. I think it was about there. And so that should kind of simplify things, and it should allow me to cut as well. Now that things have been simplified, keeping in mind, I do need to do this to both sides, or I should, but I can always just symmetry this. I want to get rid of this little edge because it's not doing anything. It's just kind of in my way. So now things are looking a little bit better. Still broken, still n-gons. And the only reason I care about this is because of the Phong shading. And while I could probably just go in and fix this, by adjusting my Phong angle, part of it is just our polygons here. So that is looking a little better. Maybe, shoot, we even just kind of cut right there. And we'll just call that good. Right? We may be able to come in and fix that, but let's see. All right, so maybe I'll try keeping this at 20. No, so I really just want that part to be good. And we'll separate out this other part now, which we'll do by going into edge mode. So what I'm going to do is select all the edges for this top section, including this curve section. And I'm going to tell this to break the Phong shading here. And so that should give us our little blade. Right? And I don't really need to do this to both sides since we're primarily looking at one. But why not? Well, time for one, but that'll be fine. And all we can do is just choose break Phong shading. So it broke the Phong shading there, so it's giving us that separation. Now we can see that blade. And aside from that little issue, things look pretty good. So I'm willing to call that all right. Yeah, well, let's see. I'm getting away from my reference image here by doing this, but it'll help things not break as much. That can work. All right, well, I think that's still a Phong issue, which we could fix, right? You can see actually now, yeah, it did fix it by increasing the angle a little bit. So, all right, blade is done. We can now move on to the rest of it. And honestly, like I said, this approach works for other knives, other swords. We're actually not quite done. It's kind of getting that line in for where the blade doesn't start, and then you can just scale it down to where things kind of come to the edge, the point, whatever. So getting those in are the most important. Honestly, it's very similar to modeling, say, a roof on a house. But let's get the capsule in there. We'll put the blade back in X-ray mode. I can create my capsule. It's obviously way too big. I'm going to rotate this. Get the shape set. You can see it already going through and where that's going to line up size-wise. So it actually needs to be just a touch bigger. And we'll just increase the height until this kind of matches. All right, so that looks good. Way too much, so we'll do something like that. Great, and we're just going to use a bool. All right. Could I use the volume object? I absolutely could, but for this right here, I can keep it as a bool because I'm not going to make it editable, so no reason to mess with that. I could always put this in a remesher as well if I decided to keep using the bool. And then lastly, capsule-wise, let's just increase the cap segments to smooth this out a bit. And there we go. We got that one little part that seems to freak out depending on how we have our segments. But there we go. Looks pretty clean. So we started with an extrude, did some polygon work to this. With this, we're going to start with a cube and use subdivision surface on it. Right. Pretty much hide the blade for right now. Go into the basic tab. X-ray is going to be our friend here. And before I even make this editable, I do at least want to get the size as close as possible. And when you're modeling something from the side like this, you do have to be a bit careful about the dimension you can't see, which in this case is the z-axis. So I definitely want to come in here and just kind of guess how big this should be. So maybe something like that. Okay. And then I'll put this in a subdivision surface by holding down Alt or Option and choosing subdivision surface. We can see how that changes the shape of this. So that's when I'll come in here and really start working with this. Now, I want to make sure I keep this round somewhat, since I do expect that to be a little bit rounded. So really, probably could have done this before I made this editable. Use loop path cut just to add some segments, and I'll type in 50% so they're in the middle. Same thing here. And then I just need to kind of round this out a bit. So really, select all those and scale them in. Now making sure not to scale them in on the Z or else, the X, or else they would get kind of narrower, which we don't want. Something like that, I think looks pretty good. You can see, as I said, we'll need to kind of pull these out a little. Before that, though, I'm going to want some helper edges so that we're not curving quite as much here. So another loop path cut. Maybe we can do 2 there. You can see how that's helping. And that looks pretty good. All right, not perfect, but for right now, pretty good. So from there, back into polygon mode, I'm going to select our inner polygon, and we definitely need to make this smaller. So I will inset this to about the size that I'm seeing there. Great. And if I was going to round this out anymore, now is the time to do that. So I can go into point mode here, select these points, scale them out a bit. Or I can turn off my subdivision surface. And there's a lot to kind of toggle on or off here to see exactly what we're doing. That looks okay. Maybe we could even do the same thing with these a little bit to kind of round this out. All right, so that looks pretty good. Back this, extrude. All right, well, had a bit of an issue there. Cinema 4D crashed, but now I'm back. So if this looks a little bit different, that is why. But pretty much at the same spot where we're going to start pulling out the rest of the handle here. So let's start by extruding. And you can see how, even though I thought I had that the right size, turns out I did not. That's something we can fix in just a bit, but I'm going to take this first extrusion and just kind of move it kind of very far down here just to get this process started. I will also just move that and then put the subdivision surface in X-ray mode here. So we can see kind of the problem we're running into where this is a bit too large. Select the cube, and now the X-ray mode is giving me problems, but I'm going to select all the way around this, or at least try to. If I need to select this a few times to get that loop, I can. Turn subdivision surface back on. So a lot of back and forth here, as you're seeing. Kind of scale this, and if I need to move it as well, I can absolutely do that. Just do that. And as I scale this, I want to make sure I'm really only using the Y here. So I actually definitely did a uniform scale, and this is one of the few times that can be a little bit confusing and cause issues down the road. So that looks pretty good. All right. And it's not a bad idea to just turn off subdivision surface and just kind of start to get things looking good without it. So I know I'm going to need a cut right here. So I'll put one there. And I'm going to need like one right here, maybe even one right there. And at this point, I either want to just scale on the y-axis to make this fit, or just pull points up. But as I'm pulling points up, notice how I'm grabbing all of them from the top and not just the very top one. And that'll keep the rounding and things like that the same. And if I find I need another loop, some additional points to work with, I'll just use loop cut to go ahead and do that. And what we should see with this is that we can get pretty close with this, and we'll just need to kind of pull things out a little bit after. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Maybe want one more right here to make things kind of conform to the profile we're seeing, something like that. This back part, I can just extrude out one more time. Start to pull that down and go into point mode. Do something kind of like this, just kind of pulling this out to match. So at this point, I can now turn this on and see what we have. And look, we followed the contour pretty well, just things need to be pulled up a little bit more. And so that is what I'm going to do. I could absolutely do a lot of this at once by selecting multiple points here. So everything looks pretty good. Pretty good. All right. Even that pretty much does it. And now if we look, you can see we have our handle. Now it turns out it's maybe a bit thinner than we would like. Okay, I'm going to turn off all the X-ray stuff now. So yeah, ended up being a bit thinner perhaps than I would have liked. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a top view now because I want to avoid scaling this completely, but I'm going to select all, say, one side here and make sure I also select these points, and I can just pull them out. I'm keeping an eye on how much I'm doing this so I can do it the same to the other side, so about maybe 4. And then back to the top view. So I can, oops, looks like I missed a few, maybe. Let's double check that. Yep, missed these. But it was about 4 centimeters. And I did that. And I'll do the same there. Select these points and move them 4 centimeters as well. And we could scale it. Obviously, would have been a little bit quicker, but it would have changed the rounding here because the proportions in these angles would change if you scale things out, right? So that's what we wanted to avoid. So that's looking good. The last couple things to finish this off, okay? What I would do, and you may be wondering why I have this null called OG. I use that for any geometry that I want to kind of keep an older version of. So if this is, say, the handle, that was a terrible job spelling that. I'm going to put a copy of it in there. It's hidden, but I'm actually going to make this editable just to make my life easier for these last couple of changes. While I could have kept this not editable, adding in these extra last couple edge loops just would have made things a little bit trickier. Now, actually, I'm noticing in one of my extrudes, I had create caps turned on. So that's what I'm seeing in here. I want to get rid of these. Honestly, it probably was doing something to my shape. So if yours was looking a little bit different, that is why. But I want to get rid of those. I do not want those inner polygons. They were just in my way. Do I have them right here as well? I do. So these polygons, I'll check before I delete them. These I'm not quite as certain about. Yep, I would want to get rid of these as well. So they're a little bit trickier to select since they're inside. So something like that. Great. I don't know if that made anything difficult or easier, but there we have it. And what I want to do now is just kind of give myself a natural place to change materials from the metal to the rubber on the end here, as well as up towards the top. And so I can just do a loop path cut. I could just do a single cut, but I'm going to do 2 right next to each other. So maybe even closer than that. And then come in with polygon and select those little polygons inside by using loop selection. I just hit V to pull up that menu. Select them and just extrude. And this time I will make sure to turn off create caps and just do a little bit there. So that way I have that little bit of separation, and I can very easily apply different materials there. And the same thing really right there, though I think I have that hard edge because of that create caps. So another loop path cut, close together like that. Back into V, loop selection, and then extrude that in a little bit for that change. And that will do it. Let's get X-ray out of that. And you can see, yeah, that create caps really kind of screwed things up there. But that's the knife, and that is the process I went through for the finished version. You saw at the beginning. Just added some materials and lighting, but there we go. I would totally group these together, right? Put them inside a null. Well, let's just do the shortcut Alt-G. And that way, everything is combined, ready to be used for any other purposes. All right, well, that will do it for this video. If you could do me a favor, like this, comment if there's something else you would like to see in a video, and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. But until next time, take care.